All right, everyone. Hello, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever time zone you might be in. Hello and welcome to this guest speaker series session. Today, our speaker is Janet Folger Porter. She is a passionate pro-life advocate, author, and strategist dedicated to protecting the unborn and advancing faith-driven action. With over 30 years of experience in public policy, media, and grassroots activism, she has played a key role in shaping pro-life legislation and organizing movements that defend life at every stage. As the architect of the Heartbeat Bill, Janet has spearheaded one of the most influential pro-life laws in the US, inspiring similar legislations across multiple states. She is also the founder and president of Faith2Action, an organization committed to turning faith into action through media outreach, advocacy, and cultural engagement. A sought-after speaker, Janet has been featured on major news outlets and has authored books that empower individuals to stand boldly for their values. Her work bridges faith, politics, and activism, equipping the next generation with the knowledge and courage to create lasting change. Through her leadership, writing, and advocacy, Janet continues to inspire and educate those who believe in defending life and shaping a culture that values every human being. With all that being said, let's welcome Janet Porter.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be with you guys this morning. I guess it is over there. What a privilege. I've been to Singapore 3 or 4 times and love it. Love the people and the country. And the way I described it to a friend of mine, it's like South Florida, part of America, only you all drive on the left. So if I remember correct. So my story really begins when I was 9 years old. I went forward at a Billy Graham crusade. Billy Graham was a worldwide evangelist. He spoke in Singapore many times. And he asked those who want to give their life to Jesus to come forward. And I was 9 years old, came forward at that crusade and said, you know what? I don't want to pay for my own sins. I'm going to take the price that Jesus paid and accept him as my savior. And so my life has changed since then. I realize that it's all written in a book. This Bible right here. Turns out that God is real, his word is true, and his way is best. And what that means to me is that it's not about us. It's not about our lack and our inabilities, because I was the kid who was afraid to give a speech. It was embarrassing. I mean, I would speak in front of the class and I would shake and cry, and it was humiliating because I was afraid that I wouldn't do a good job. I still have sometimes that fear where, what are people going to think? And what if I mess up? And fear is something that keeps us from our destiny. And so when I found out about what's happening in America and Singapore and around the world to innocent children who, through no fault of their own, are destroyed by the very brutal methods of abortion, I had to speak up. It was either I had to decide which was more significant, the fact that they're killing in America at that time, it was 4,000 babies every day, or the fact that I'm afraid to tell anyone about it. And my fear of public speaking lost that contest. And so I did it afraid. I stepped out and I brought my mother with me and took her to the Speakers Bureau training and learned all about the fetal development. That at 6 weeks, this baby in the womb has a beating heart, and actually that happens earlier, much earlier, at 18 days, 21 days, but we can detect it at 6 weeks along with measurable brain waves. And by 8 weeks in the womb, this baby is already sucking her thumb, and is every organ is present and developing. And so I learned these facts and went out to speak. I remember going and speaking in high school classes. I spoke at assemblies and things like this in churches. And I remember there was one year where I was asked to be the keynote speaker at an event, and one of the women pulled me aside. She pulled me aside and said, I went through speakers training with you, and I have to tell you, I'm really surprised that you ended up being our spokesperson. What you say to that? Thank you. In other words, you weren't very good, and here you are now, the keynote speaker, the main speaker for this event. But this is what I know. Faith is so significant. It's refusing to call God a liar, that he is one who said that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. In my state of Ohio, where I was born, we have a motto of the state. And the motto of the state, the official government motto of the state of Ohio, is with God, all things are possible. And that's sort of been my my own personal motto as well. That means that impossibilities bow to the name of Jesus. It means that we can step out and do what they say can't be done. And so when I was in college, I was still timid, still afraid. In fact, they had a professor. I was writing my first book. This is my first book it's called True to Life. Uh, I worked for a pastor named D. James Kennedy and ran what's called the Center for Reclaiming America. And they said, we want to offer on television a book. And I said, okay, so here's a book I recommend, written by Dr. Wilkie, the founder of the pro-life movement. He was also president of International Right to Life. They said, no, we want you to write a book in a month. I said, I don't even write a book in a month. And yet I shut down my life and I wrote my first book. And in it, as I was writing, I remembered being in college and the professor saying, name the biggest problems in America. And people were shouting out different issues. They'd say homelessness, and they'd say, poverty, or they'd say racism, whatever it is. And someone shouted out abortion. And the professor never wrote it down on the board. So I was still pretty timid, but I said to the person next to me that, hey, you notice he didn't write down that one. He didn't write down abortion, even though it was spoken of by the class. And that girl who I happened to sit next to in a big auditorium classroom said, we're starting a pro-life group. Would you like to help us? And so the first year I was secretary of that group. The second year I was president of Students for Life. And we educated people on campus about what was happening. Because in the 10th grade, I found out what was happening in America. And when a speaker came to my class and they showed the pictures of every abortion that is successful, and it's basically the choice. Once a woman is pregnant, she already has a child. Biologically, medically, physically, she already has a child. Half the time that child is a different gender. It's half the time it's male. It clearly can't be both male and female at the same time. It has two heartbeats, two different blood types, potentially, different DNA. And I saw the result of an abortion in a garbage can where dead babies were tossed in the garbage can. And I said, there's nothing that can make that okay. No one can give me a slogan that makes that all right. And, you can't tell me that the solution to a problem is to kill a child. It just doesn't mesh. And so from that time, I became very involved in the pro-life movement. And as I said, it was started the pro-life group, helped to start it on campus. And Ohio Right to Life was the state group that was lobbying and legislating in this area. And they asked me to be their legislative director. So I got my master's degree and came and was the legislative director for Ohio Right to Life and passed some legislation that was good, parental consent before a parent could have an abortion, that they needed to be able to tell mom and dad about this. They would have to tell mom or dad if a minor child, someone under the age of 18, was going to have their tooth pulled or take penicillin or an aspirin in the high school or junior high. So why not, if this child is being exposed to a surgery, which is something that puts her life and certainly the life of her child at risk, parents ought to know about it. They ought to give their consent. So we passed that bill. We passed Women's Right to Know bill, the Women's Right to Know bill, which informed women of all of the facts about fetal development so they would know that their child has fingers and toes, even at 8 weeks, and can feel pain and has that beating heart. And so also let women know of the help that's available. That, guess what? The father is responsible in America to pay for child support. One of the things that many may not know is that in every state in the United States, there's what's called a safe haven law. And what that means is if a woman has a baby and she doesn't want to care for it, doesn't, for whatever reason, want to nurture this child and care for it for 18 years, she can drop it off at the hospital, the fire station, and no questions asked. It will be placed in the loving homes of foster parents, adoptive parents. And so no one has to have a child or to care for a child for 18 years if they don't want to. There are people standing in line miles long to adopt. In fact, that's why many in America are going overseas to adopt, because so many abortions are taking place. So we worked to pass a lot of those things. In fact, we ended up passing what's called the nation's first ban on partial birth abortion. And what that is when the child is basically delivered 4/5 of the way. The child is more born than unborn. And what they do is, and this is a tough thing to talk about, but it's brutal that if you did it to a dog in America, you'd be thrown in jail. And yet they're doing it to human babies who are 4/5 of the way born, where all but the head is delivered, and they suck the brains out of a living, kicking, half-born baby. And so we introduced the first one in the country. And they tried to block us, and we did what was called a discharge petition. In fact, all of this is being written into a screenplay, which we are looking to make into a movie to communicate that with God, all things are possible. They said it couldn't be done, and yet we passed the nation's first ban on partial birth abortion, and there were 30 states that followed. And so we also saw it pass in Congress 4 times. It was vetoed twice by then President Clinton. It was signed twice by then President George W. Bush. And then it went to the Supreme Court not once, but twice, where ultimately it was upheld in 2007. So the key in all of this is persistence. You know, you just can't give up. You've got to keep fighting and keep going. In fact, I remember the day when that bill was upheld, when the partial birth abortion ban was upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. I was in Washington. I was working on another bill and feeling distraught and very discouraged. And I was like, does any of this matter? Is anything I've done, is it any of it make any difference? Is this a waste? What is the point of it? Because as soon as we do something, they block us. And it was just this great big battle. And before I could get off the plane, the decision was made, and my phone blew up with phone messages of congratulations, the Supreme Court upheld this partial birth abortion ban that began in the state of Ohio. And so I lived in Florida for a while, of Southern America, where it's very much like the weather of Singapore, and came back to Ohio to be with family. And my husband says in the Bible that out of the heart, the mouth speaks. He just looked at me and said, this was 2010, October 2010. He says, hey, why don't you outlaw abortion while you're here? And I sort of laughed at him and looked at my watch and said, I'm here anyway. I might as well do that, and laughed because, it's a pretty monumental task, right? But 2 weeks later, God gave me the idea for a heartbeat bill. And what that bill means is that if a heartbeat is detected, the baby is protected. And there were a lot of people said, oh, this can't be done. We rather regulate abortion. We regulate around the edges of abortion. This one gets to the heart of the matter. This one protects 9 out of 10 babies facing abortion today. And so we introduced the bill, and we had to fight against the people I used to work for. Ohio Right to Life fought the bill to protect babies whose heartbeats can be heard. And so we just kept pounding away and just kept reintroducing it and passing it in the House. They were blocking it in the Senate, reintroducing this bill. We tried everything. I mean, honestly, anything you can think of to pass this bill. We had a balloon, a big heart balloon, 3 stories high. I got this balloon, and it went in front of the State House, and it said, pass the heartbeat bill now. We had 4,000 red heart balloons that we introduced this bill with at our press conference. And we delivered them to the members of Congress saying, have a heart, pass the heartbeat bill. We had heart-shaped cookies, heart candies. We had roses. We filled up a room full of roses, of 2,200 roses in a press conference on Valentine's Day. You get the theme of the heartbeat and Valentine's. And that was the number of babies the heartbeat bill would save every month. We had 70 pieces of baby clothes that we hung on a clothesline in front of the State House to show people this is how many babies, 70 babies, that the heartbeat bill would save every single day. And we delivered a packet of 70 baby clothes to the governor, to the Speaker of the House, and then to the Senate President. We had every group you can imagine. One of my favorite was we had women who've had abortions testify. The pastors came, African Americans came, everybody who was for life came out. But we had one press conference called Kids for the Heartbeat Bill. And one of them was a 7-year-old who got up on a stool because he was too short to be seen over the podium. And he says, we need to pass the heartbeat bill now. And when I say now, I mean right now. And so this little kid, we had teddy bears. And that when you press the teddy bear's stomach, it had a human heartbeat. So it's sort of like you could hear the heartbeat through these teddy bears, and they delivered them to the senators. We had everything you can think of. We rented a plane to fly over the State House, took out ads, ran candidates against these guys who were blocking us. But ultimately, we introduced the bill the fifth time, and we got it through. In fact, it was after I went to Singapore, and we prayed. We did some prophetic acts. We just cried out to God and said, "We need your help to pass this bill." And so the bill finally passed in 2019. There were 5 heartbeat laws that passed that year, but there were 15 that have passed. The most recent was in Florida. I just found out that we saved over 20,000 babies in the state of Florida since May 1st when we passed the bill and it became law, which is a stadium full of children who have been saved through the heartbeat bill, a heartbeat law. We've also have one that's pending in Congress. We introduced it in Congress with the help of the former majority leader and a team that went door to door. And we just met with these members of Congress and we said, if a heartbeat's detected, the baby's protected. Let's keep hearts beating and let's trust the science. I remember when they said, "This is terrible. How dare you? Come here." We brought in an ultrasound. We actually rolled in a mobile ultrasound, and we billed it as the youngest to ever testify. And we had a 9-week-old baby who was not yet born on the screen for everyone in the committee to see her little heartbeat and see it beat and hear it beat. And when they said, "Oh, Janet and her gimmicks and Janet and her antics," I said, "Isn't it sad that to maintain your position, you have to deny science? Because to deny a heartbeat is to deny science. To ignore it is heartless." And so we also showed a baby's heartbeat in Congress. A little 18-month-old unborn baby Lincoln was shown in Congress. And what's interesting is people who were there to protest us, the pro-abortion people, they were wearing purple and they were protesting us. And when the little baby Lincoln was shown up on the screen for the whole committee to see, and you see his heartbeat, you see his little hand moving around, and you see his face, and you see his heartbeat, the room was silent. And we saw the protesters who were disruptive just moments before wipe tears from their eyes. And that's when I realized that this baby's heartbeat can reach even the hardest of hearts, and it's reached America. And I believe it can reach the people of Singapore, that if a heartbeat's detected, the baby's protected. That's really the message. And the message is that people said, "How did you pass it?" And the message is, well, we just wouldn't give up. And what I told Governor DeSantis of Florida is that when we started out, they said, "It's too much. You can't do it. It's protecting too many babies. We'd rather just regulate around the edges of abortion." It was once the ceiling. But as I told the governor of Florida, it's now the floor. It's now the bare minimum that we can do to protect children. And we're protecting stadiums full of children each year. We've still got a long way to go. We've got a lot to overcome here. But I know this, that if the kid who was afraid to give a speech, the one who was too nervous to speak in front of a group, if God can use me, he can use any one of you. And the state of Ohio motto, I just want to impart it to you. Our state motto is, "With God, all things are possible." And we happen to know that's true. I've witnessed it. I also know it's true because Jesus was the one who said it. So I guess what I'll do, they said about 20 minutes, so I just wanted to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer anybody's questions or concerns or ideas, or help yourself.
Thank you so much for sharing that informative information, Janet. I actually have a few questions as well that I want to ask. One of them is probably, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about like pro-life advocacy?
Well, I think that there is a lot of misconceptions. They say that we're the ones who are the haters, right? And yet we're the ones trying to protect children. I guess the way we put it is we're the ones who actually care about women enough to tell them the truth and to help them. I was on a television show a while back, and there was someone in the audience, and they said, "You're talking about those fake clinics. We have pregnancy centers throughout America." In fact, I met Jennifer Hahn over there, who runs a pregnancy center there in Singapore. They called her the Janet Porter of Singapore, but she runs a pregnancy center. What they do is they help women for free make a choice that she and her child can both live with. And so when someone in the audience says, "You're talking about those fake clinics trying to lure women in, lure them away from abortion," I said, here's the way you can tell the difference. So if you're looking through the internet, you're looking to see what the difference is. If you see any reference to Visa or MasterCard, or if money changes hands, that's abortion. Our services are free. We're not in it for money. We're in it to help women and to help their children. Because why can't we love them both? It's not a question of pitting one against the other. Both can be helped. Both can be loved. Both can have their life and destiny. And that's really the issue with the pro-life movement. We're pro-women, we're pro-child, and it's not one or the other. In this case, it's both.
Yeah, honestly, I have to agree with that. One of the biggest things that I have also encountered as someone who tried to support, who is supporting pro-life, their biggest argument is if you're pro-life, then you're probably against women and stuff because abortion just basically takes away their right, etc. To Don also wanted to ask, would you help us understand just how costly it has been for you to do your work? And could you quickly mention as well the name of the person in Singapore who's offering free services for both women and children?
Yeah, her name is Jennifer Hahn. I can connect you after the program, so y'all can get together. Jennifer Hahn, and she's a friend, and I have been talking to her about getting a heartbeat bill in Singapore. But one of the things that I encountered in America is I encountered other places too, is this feeling of we can never do it. They won't pass it. It's we're lucky to get a millimeter of protection. And I just want to say, step out and do it. That's the same thing they told us. But once you've gone through, you break through the brick wall, that brick wall crumbles. There are 15 states that passed it a lot easier than we did because we were the first. And once it's become law, once it's actually protecting babies and protecting mothers, it's much easier for other states and other nations to follow. So yeah, Jennifer Hahn is your connection there.
To
My
everyone.
name
Oh, sorry,
is
go ahead.
Jennifer Hay, Director of Safe Space. She's very well known in this sector for the work that she does. Very, very wonderful.
I have another one. As an author and speaker, what advice would you give to young activists who want to make a difference?
The advice I would give, first and foremost, is get plugged into the source. All right. It says in this book, in the Bible, that apart from God, we can do nothing. Nothing of value, significance, eternal significance. And so it's like a light. You got to plug in the light to get the power. So what I do every day is I get in this book and I hear from the creator what it is he would say to me. And what's great about it is that every promise in this book I can apply. If I'm a Christian, I've repented of my sins, I've asked him to be my savior, I put him in charge of my life, then guess what? Every promise that's in this book, I can claim as my own. When it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But you know what? When it looks impossible, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I remember there was a prophetic voice who said the heartbeat bill was going to pass. I remember I was crying on the floor because they were blocking us for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I was just crying out to God. And I'm like, you know what? At some point, you got to act like the word of God is true and say, you know what? It's not about what I can't do. I'm not a good speaker. It's not about that. It's about that God can work through us. Francis Schaeffer said this, that faith is not a leap in the dark. It is ceasing to call God a liar. If you trust in God, then trust what he says. Trust the power that works in you, the resurrected power of Jesus Christ, that once you accept him in your life, he is the one in charge. And so it's not about all the things Janet can't do. It's about all the things God can do through ordinary people who are flawed, who have insecurities and all kinds of issues. It's trusting in God and stepping out and doing it afraid. When I started out, I was a lousy speaker. I kept trying and I just knew it was the right thing to do. It was a call in my life to be a voice for the voiceless. One of the women in a committee hearing said, where do you come off to say to be a Christian, you have to be pro-life? She said, the Bible is a book on tolerance, and Jesus never said the word abortion. So here I am in this legislative committee, and I said, well, if you look in this book, you'll see that thou shalt not kill made the top 10 commandments, not suggestions. And what Jesus had to say is, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And it says in Proverbs 24:11 that we're commanded to rescue those who are being carried away to death. It says in Proverbs 31:8 that we're commanded to be a voice for those appointed to die. When you step out in the pro-life movement, you're just doing what God says to do. You're just obeying God. You're doing what he says. And that's really the heart of what it means to be a Christian is to keep his commandments. And so I just want to encourage you. There's a lot of things that are weighing at you, a lot of things that would distract you. There's video games, there's the internet, there's scrolling on your phone. But I want to say, get plugged into the source, get with the creator and say, what would you have me do? And when God gives you a prompting of what to do, when he gave me the idea of the heartbeat bill, I knew it came from him, and I knew I was to do it. And that's when we kept failing. We kept introducing it and failing and failing. And I'll give you one story. The fifth year, this was right before I went to Singapore for the first time. We introduced the bill, and we had a governor who was vetoing the bill. So we had to introduce the bill, and instead of 50 out of 99 votes, we had to get to 60. All right. We had never had 60 votes before. And so I went down, and I remember telling my husband, I said, I just don't want to go down there and fail again. And I drove down. He told me, you can do it. I was actually on the phone with a friend of mine from Singapore. And I said, this is going to take an act of God. And he says, well, isn't that what you're counting on? Isn't that what you're in this for? And so I went down there with impossible odds by myself. Lots of people come the next day when the vote takes place. They like that because that's fun. You wear the red shirts and you see the victory and you stand and get your selfie. But the work is done behind the scenes. And so I was lobbying people, and we came within maybe within a vote or two. We might get to 60. I met with a Democrat, and he was the only Democrat vote we had. And we met with other Democrats trying to get their votes. I said, there was one other guy. I said, this one guy's name is Glenn Holmes. I said, he has these concerns on the bill, and I highlighted the bill. I said, get to him and tell him this about his concerns. And so the session begins. This is a spiritual battle. Don't think for a minute it's not, because right now the pro-aborts are coming out. They have a T-shirt that says pro-abort witch. They got earrings this big that are pentagrams, and they all have their phone aimed at me, right? I'm like, oh boy. We had some people praying. So we get up, the session begins, the debate starts, and I get a text from our Democrat friend, African-American liberal Democrat, and he says, done. Oh my goodness. He got to our vote. He might be the swing vote. And so what happens is the Democrats get wind of this. They don't want their Democrat to vote that way. So they call for a recess. And they beat him up and say, you better not pass this. You better not vote for this, or we'll run someone against you. We'll kill your political career. And so I went down and I talked to my buddy, our Democrat friend. He says, yeah, they're challenging him right now. And so we just held hands outside the chamber that day and we prayed. And so what happened was the session came back, and the board, they have a board in America that has the votes, probably similar in Singapore. If it's a yes vote, it's green. If it's a no vote, it's red. And if they don't show up, they're not there voting, it's orange. And so I'm sitting in the chamber, and a buddy of mine, I had him take the picture of the votes. And we need to get to 60. And the debate's happening, and we're not sure what's going to happen. We got to get to 60. We've never been to 60 votes before. And the vote is cast, 58-35. And I'm 2 votes short. I'm like, that's not right. I thought we had more votes than that. And so what happened was, I start looking at the board. I start looking at the votes, and 10 minutes go by, and the guy Glenn Holmes, the Democrat that they threatened, he went forward and voted yes. We're now at 59 votes. We're 1 vote away, and I see one of the votes. Her name is Marilyn Slavey. Her vote was orange. I'm like, why is she orange? Well, maybe she's not here. I said, no, she's here. I handed her a gift bag with a heart pin and heart chocolates as she walked in the chamber. I know she's here. I said, well, maybe they flipped her. I said, no, not this one. She was a co-sponsor. She didn't flip. So I get the phone number of her husband, who held the seat before her. I call him up and said, Lynn, this is Janet Porter. We have 3 bills yet to go. We have less than an hour. We need to get your wife back. She's the swing vote. And he says to me, that's impossible. If you grow up in America, you grow up in Ohio, where your state motto is, with God, all things are possible, you look at things differently. If you hold on to the words in this book, you look at, someone says impossible, you say, yeah, let me introduce you to the God of the impossible. And I said, will you pull off the road, please? Because I'm on my way to get her right now. He says, I'm an hour away. And no, it's 2 hours away. So what happened was I hopped in my car. I started running for my car. It's now snowing like a blizzard. And I'm running through my car. I go 2.5 blocks. I get to my car. I'm out of breath. I'm looking through my purse and I can't find my keys. And there's a man comes walking over very, very calmly, very, very peaceful. And he said, here, you drop these in the crosswalk 2 blocks away. My husband said he was either a marathon runner or an angel. And so I drove and I found out my buddy's, his mom used to be an intern of mine. And I knew she lived in that area. And she drove south while I drove north, and we came back, brought her back for the vote. And that's how we passed it with a veto-proof margin, even after all the news said that they didn't have enough votes and it was a failure. And even though they had 59 votes, it wasn't enough. Well, they didn't know that I was in the car bringing back the swing vote. When you trust the God of the Bible, it changes how you live. People said to me, how in the world did you go through a blizzard on a 4-hour round trip to bring back somebody? And I said, you know what? You either believe this word or you don't. And if you do, it's going to change how you live. And so that's how we got it through. And that'll make a nice movie too one day.
Another question from Justin and Jemmy. In this faith journey, were there moments when you thought you might have to take a break, breathe, and then persist on in prayer?
Yeah, lots of times. We had a prayer call every morning for an hour. We prayed on the phone with people from around the state, from around the country. And so they say, Janet, well, look how bold you are. Look how courageous you might be. They didn't know that I was on the phone crying, talking about, how they blocked us, how they lied to us, how they cheated. And it was really just the prayers of our inner circle, and trusting in God and not quitting, never giving up. That's it. They had to know we're not giving up. In fact, one of my, there was a girl who she was an intern of mine, and she came and she helped us out. Her name is Caitlin, and she got married. She asked me to be in her wedding, and they took pictures at the State House because the State House is very picturesque, very, very lovely. So she had her bridal gown on, and I had my bridesmaid gown on. We had our hair in the updo, we were taking all the pictures, and I said, let's go to the Senate. So we actually were handing out flyers in our bride's clothes in the Senate. I'm like, you know what? I want them to know we're crazy. We might be crazy, but we're not going away. We're not giving up. And I don't care what you do, and I don't care how long it is, and I don't care what you do to block us. We are not quitting. And that's it. And that's what ultimately I think was one of the things that they realized they had better do this, because we were running candidates against them. In fact, I was recruiting candidates to run against these senators who were blocking us. And there was one day I tried to get someone to run against the Senate president, and couldn't do it. I lobbied pastors. I tried to get people in. That Senate president lived in my district. So I still remember the phone call from my friend Lori. She says, did you, we got all these candidates running against these senators who are blocking us. And goes, did you ever find anybody to run against the Senate president? And I said, no, I never did. She said, that's too bad. That would have been a great thing to get a statement made. And someone across the counter says, can you sign here? And she goes, sign here. Where are you? I said, I'm filing to run against the Senate president. I ran against the president of the Senate. We made them pay for their blocking of the bill. We called them out. We exposed them. We ran full-page ads showing that they were rhinos. We call them as Republican in name only. That means they're fake Republicans. They use babies to get elected instead of using elections to save babies.
This is someone also who is based in another country who doesn't have much experience in the US. Don is also asking about this, as the audience here and the audience who will be watching are from many different cultural backgrounds, many different faith backgrounds as well. She's asking, would you help us understand some cultural differences that you have come across that help you make sense of your work? For example, how does pro-life look like across cultures, and how is the US unique?
Well, I don't have a lot of experience. I mean, like I said, I've been to Singapore a few times. I would like to see this happen in other nations. We were contacted by other nations, France, Spain, when we first introduced this. Canada was interested. But I only know America, so I'm not able to tell you much about the cross differences. But I do know this, that this is a biological issue. That it's science. No matter what you believe or what your background is, if a human, it's a human being because it has human DNA. We know that it's a heartbeat because, look, we never have been to a funeral. You've never been to a funeral with somebody with a beating heart, because if there's a heartbeat, there's life. That's why those monitors in the hospitals, they're not there for decoration. Those monitors are there because it's the universally recognized indicator of life. No matter where you live, what country you're in, what hospital you go to, there's a heart monitor. They check the pulse because it is the universally recognized indicator of life. And so we can't protect them all from the moment our lives begin, from conception. We can at least recognize that heartbeat is a sign of life. It's recognized everywhere else. Why do we exclude? Why do we discriminate against the very young and pretend like we don't hear their heartbeat crying out like an SOS, crying out from the ultrasound? When we hear it, we can see it. We need to no longer ignore it.
You've also shared many points as well as to why pro-life is so good. Why do you think, though, many people are for abortions right now?
Yeah, I believe, I was just telling somebody today, I used to think that if I could just talk with somebody for 1 hour, I could explain the science. I could explain that this is a child. The choice is whether it'll be a live child or a dead child. I could explain it. I used to think that if I had 1 hour, I could communicate with anybody and show them the truth, show them the picture. It's a baby. You can see it's. In fact, I'll tell you how clear it is. I was speaking at a college one time, and we had the fetal models. You've seen them where they show the different stages of development for the unborn baby, through 9 months, and I remember I was there speaking. It was outside the University of Cincinnati, and I said, I kept talking about protecting the babies and the children. And this woman got in my face. She had a little 3-year-old daughter on her arm, and she said, "When will you quit calling it a baby? It's not a baby, it's a fetus." And I explained to her that fetus is the Latin word which means unborn child, developing human, young one. That's what it means. And so no, it's not, it's a fetus, and don't call it a baby, don't call it a child. In the middle of our discussion, her 3-year-old was tugging on her sleeve, points to the fetal models of the unborn babies, and says to her mother, "Look, mommy, babies." In the middle of our debate, her own child recognized what she refused to see. It's science. And what we've got to do is quit denying science. And we need to stand up and say, you know what? This is not okay. It's not acceptable to take a fellow human being and dismember them limb from limb, pull them out of the womb and suck their brains out, or burn them alive with saline poison. It is the ultimate child abuse. And it's time we rise up and stop this. In a world where we've got ultrasound, 4D ultrasound, where you can see that child in the womb, you can see the distinctions in their face as when they're born, you compare it. And that's why so many, by the way, so many youth in America are now becoming more pro-life, because their first picture of in their photo album is their unborn ultrasound picture. They know that they were alive, and that even before, the pictures were proof that they were alive before they were born. And we need to stand up and protect those children who are no longer unknown. We can see it now. And we can do something about it.
Yael also wants to ask, what is one thing you want to improve in your advocacy the most? And by extension, what do you think the pro-life/anti-abortion movement should do better?
I'd like to have some funds. We've been doing this on a shoestring for a long time. It would be great to have some funds. One of the things in my heart is we're running we want to run a national campaign to win the heart of America back to life. And it's a story about how we passed the nation's first ban on partial birth abortion, came up with the idea for the heartbeat bill. And so I've written a screenplay. It's called What's a Girl to Do? It's based off another book I wrote. I wrote a book called What's a Girl to Do While Waiting for Mr. Right. And I had to be talked into writing that, but I'm using that title. I like the title, and it has now won 9 film festivals best screenplay awards. And so we're trying to get the funds to make that movie. And that's one of the things I'd like to do. I'd like to do it better, but we need the funds to do it. So that's one thing I'd want. I think that there's a lot of compromise, and there's a lot of infighting. What it says in the Bible is that brethren dwell together in unity. There's a blessing that's commanded. Our biggest battle was not against Democrats. It was against people who claim to be pro-life Republicans. They have the fear of man. You got to say, I don't care what people think about me. You know what? There was a point in this battle where I could literally count my friends on one hand, but I knew who they were. And we had to realize that, in fact, I'll tell you one conversation I had with a buddy of mine. His name is Mark Crutcher. from Texas. He called me up. He says, "How's it going, Janet?" He had a little bit of an accent, right? And I said, "Well," I said, "they're blocking our bill in Congress. They're blocking our bill in the Ohio Senate." I said, "I can count my friends in one hand, on one hand." And he says, "Janet, did you go down to the State House to make friends? Or did you go down there to end abortion?" And the answer was, I went down there to end abortion. I don't care who's my friend. I don't care if I get a photo op, and I don't care who likes me. If I have everybody's cell phone number, who's the governor, and yes, I have the governor's cell phone number, but it's not about access. It's about influence. It's about using the means that you have, and using it for good. I think that timidity is one of the biggest problems in life, let alone the pro-life movement, because there were times where they weakened the bill. They wanted to weaken the bill to protect only 12-week babies. And I remember I was sitting in this seat right here. I'm on the phone and I'm literally planning a press conference to scream from the housetops that they are trying to weaken the bill. How dare they? And in the middle of this call, I'm setting up the press conference for the next day. And I had another legislator working on a committee chairman trying to get this moved. And the phone call comes in they knew that that was not okay. I was not going to accept their weakened version of the bill and say, "Oh, that's okay. We'll have a press conference, pretend like we won." I wasn't going to do that. And the phone call came in. They didn't say hello. They said, "What do you want?" I told them what I wanted, that this needs to be fixed in the bill, that this needs to be done. They said, "Will you support the bill if this is changed?" And I said, "Yes, but I need proof. Ronald Reagan says you can trust, but you have to verify." And so once I had the verification, we supported the bill and it went through. Then the Senate tried to block it. It's just this constant battle. There was never a time where we just skirted through. But I'll say this, it was harder than I thought. It took longer than I thought, but it was worth it. And so if you have people that are committed to do whatever it takes to not give up. Remember my husband saying, you're introducing the bill again? And I know that the idea came from God. I knew it was an assignment, and for that reason, I could not quit. So I guess that's the key, is perseverance, and boldness, and not caring about what people think. That's how we can improve in the pro-life movement, in addition to working together. But I don't care if there were times where it's just one or two of us that were working this and getting out mailings, and it looked like there was an army, and it was just a handful of people. But God can work through a small number. But I would recommend do it with at least two people, so you have someone to pull you up when you're down, and vice versa.
Brian Brian is asking also, what's your next goal you want to achieve?
Yeah, the next thing is I want to do this national campaign in the form of a movie. And it's a romantic comedy. I'll tell you how this happened. I've been trying to make this movie for a long time, 20 years, as long as you guys have been alive. And the thing is, someone told me that when it has significance, when something has historic significance or eternal significance, it doesn't happen quickly. I'm like, I wish I would have known that in the early years of this heartbeat bill, in the later years of this heartbeat bill. But I believe that that's an assignment that I have, to be able to communicate this message in a way that is watchable. And how is it watchable? Well, about 2018, 6 years ago or so, I had a guy who was going to give $2 million to make the movie. And I was supposed to match that, but I didn't know any millionaires. So he said he reallocated the money. So my dream of making this movie was pretty much gone. My bill was being blocked in Congress. It was being blocked in the Ohio Senate. I'd like to say that I got on my knees and cried out to God, or that I dug into this book, or I went into Christian programming. But what I did, I felt like I just needed encouragement. I needed to laugh. So I watched a couple of sitcoms. About the third one, I was so disgusted by the agenda that came with it. I dusted off a script, and I went back to the investor and I said, he said he had maybe some seed money. It wasn't the $2 million. I said, well, how much were you thinking in the seed money? He said $100,000. I said, well, that's not necessarily enough for a movie, but it is enough for a sitcom pilot. And we made a pilot with Robert Davi and some well-qualified actors. And we had it's now an award-winning sitcom. It's on the website, whatsagirl.com. At the very bottom, and you can watch the full episode 8. It's our Christmas episode. You can watch it at the very bottom of whatsagirl.com. But that actually aired on the PTL network last year. It's won an award. It's up for more awards. And that was really practice for the movie. So here's the deal. I just showed somebody today. We have a studio. We built, we film in Florida. We filmed in Hollywood, but we built a studio in our basement. The Bible says, don't despise the day of small beginnings. Doesn't matter how small you start out. God can use. You think about the boy with his lunch. He brings a couple of loaves and some fishes, and God can use that to feed 5,000, right? And more. So my message is to you, it's not about your ability. The only ability you need to fulfill your destiny, to serve God, is availability. Make yourself available to God. Get in his word. Know what the promises are that you can claim once you've made him in charge of your life. Once you've received his forgiveness of sins, you put him in charge. That means everything he says we can have, we can have. And so we need to step out, act like the word of God is true, and advance the kingdom of God. And I just know this. It's no accident that you're here listening. I'm not even sure how this all happened that I'm on this program with you tonight. But I want to say I don't believe in accidents or coincidences. God is the director of the movie of your life. He is also the producer. If we make him the director, his script, it says in Ephesians 3:20, is exceedingly abundantly greater than anything we can imagine. So I want God's plan. It says in Psalm 139 that he knit us together in our mother's womb. He says also in that same chapter in Psalm 139 that all the days of our life were already written before one of them came to be. That means God has a book. He has a movie script for the movie of your life. And I trust the director. And I'm going to step out and I want to live every single scene in the movie he has for my life. And that includes making a movie, making a sitcom, passing legislation, saving lives. I want to tell you, it doesn't matter. If you're afraid to speak, he can use you too, because he's used me. That's my message.
Jennifer's also asking, what is your experience in countries justifying abortion if the fetus is detected with abnormalities? In Singapore hospitals, they encourage parents to abort fetuses that are abnormal as long as they are before 24 weeks.
Well, here's the deal. We have to understand that it's the same baby in the womb and as outside the womb. There's nothing added from the moment of conception from a child in the womb to a teenager. It's the only thing that's added is time and nourishment. It's the same child. It's a change of address. From born to unborn is a change of address. All right. So whatever it is that you would say we should do, say you have someone who's handicapped. In America, we give them a spot up close in front of the store, in front of the post office, in front of the school, because you have a handicap. We look to people and say, I'm going to reach out a hand to help you. I'm going to give you a spot up close. I'm going to give you preferential treatment. But what? We're going to screen you out before you're ever born? That's the height of hypocrisy. It's double-minded. Look, it's the same person, a baby, a human being, inside as outside. And so how horrific is it to say your life, we're going to pretend like you're valuable, but it's only because you escaped our attempt to take your life before you were born. No, all life is valuable. God doesn't make mistakes. And I've seen people who have been healed, by the way. And so I don't believe that, for example, someone said to me, imagine if you're unwanted and you're poor and you're homeless, and they gave all the examples you can think of, right? So I said, let me ask you something. If you think that we should have abortion for all these reasons, let me ask you this. So if we can kill human beings because of social problems, shouldn't we also go down to the city mission, the people standing in line to get a free meal or to get some free housing? Should we say, you know what, I'm going to put you out of your misery and I'm going to take a gun to your head? No, we don't kill people who need help. We help people who need help. And we should do the same regardless of their age and regardless of their place of residence.
Beverly's also asking, I think abortion is like shipping the baby away before it's delivered. What can children like us do to say something about that?
I believe that it starts with speaking up. You can start a group. That's what I did. We started a Students for Life group. I just got a note this week from a guy that started a pro-life group at Harvard Law School. Start a group and talk with 2, 3, 5, 10 people and say, what can we do? Let me tell you what we did. One time at Students for Life, we wanted to communicate how many lives are being taken by abortion. And what we did is we put all the wars that America has been in. I know this is centric to America, but you can do the same in Singapore. And we had 1 inch, we made a bar graph, and 1 inch equaled 50,000 lives. So the Revolutionary War, when our country began, was about 3/4 of an inch with the number of lives lost by that model. The Civil War was the biggest one, had about 10 inches, at 50,000 lives per inch, 10 inches of lives lost. And the other wars, the Vietnam and all these other wars were not quite an inch. They were a very small amount, comparatively speaking. Then we did a war on the unborn bar graph, and it went up 3 stories high. We held it up with a balloon. Now it would be more than twice that amount, where the building isn't big enough to show how many lives we've taken. Let me tell you something. When God wrote in stone with his hand, "Thou shalt not kill," he meant it. And we've got an obligation to obey this word, to keep his commandments. And so what you do is you use the voice you've been given. You use the circle of influence you have. And that's what happened with me. I started with a small group. I got trained to speak. I went out and spoke to all these different events. I'll tell you one story. Worst speech I ever gave. There's a church called St. Albert the Great. I gave this speech. And this is back in the day when we had slide projectors, and it wasn't working right, and the slides were wrong, and it was a handful of people, and no one invited me back. I wasn't very good. It was a lousy speech, and every time I would drive by St. Albert the Great Church for 8 years, I would drive by this church to go to visit my parents, and every time I'd get these thoughts that would come at me. By the way, all the thoughts you get, they aren't from you, because we live in a spiritual world. There's thoughts that come from God, and there's thoughts that come from Satan. But the thoughts that kept coming to me weren't from God. They were, "You're a loser. You're a terrible speaker. That's the worst speech you ever." They never invited you back. What a terrible speech. What do you think you're doing? Why are you trying to do this? You're nobody. All those thoughts would come over all those years. And 8 years later, I was in another state across the country, and a guy walked up to me. I believe God orders our steps. He walked up to me and introduced himself. His name is Joe. He says, "I know you speak at a lot of places, and I know you're probably not going to remember this." He says, but my parents about 8 years ago brought you in to speak at a little church called St. Albert the Great. I'm like, "Oh, no. I remember that one. I remember that one." And he said, "I don't know if you know this, but there was a girl who was scheduled to have an abortion that was there. And because you showed up that day, she has an 8-year-old child. And it's not about our ability. The only ability you need to serve God is availability. Make yourself available. Go out and speak, no matter whether you're a good speaker, whether you're not a good speaker, because God can use even my worst speech in my life to save a life."
What's your view on the general pro-abortion argument in the US? That adoption is not a good or foolproof alternative due to bad conditions in the sector.
It's a lie. Let's just sit back and look at what we're talking about here for a moment. People that say, "You know what? The adoptive home may not be ideal. So what we're going to recommend for your life is we're going to recommend that you're dismembered in a brutal, painful way to kill you." I mean, think about it. It's absolutely absurd when you realize there are people who would give their right arm to love your child and raise this child and be a part of letting this baby fulfill their destiny. Don't let the fact that you're not ready to have a child right now do what is best for the baby. And it's 9 months out of your life. I want to tell you that Planned Parenthood, the abortion movement, I want to say to those who are teenagers right now, if you were being, your mother was facing one of them at a counseling session, right, where they sell abortions, their first plan, the abortion movement's first plan for your life is abortion. They wanted to kill you. Why in the world would we listen to them now? Their solution is death. It says in the word that there's a way that seems right to man, but in the end it leads to death. You know what? There's life and death, and I choose life. It says in Deuteronomy that we have a choice before us. And God made it very clear. He came up with the slogan. He says, "I set before you life and death, blessings and cursing." And he said what to do. He said, "Choose life so that you and your descendants will live." I choose life. I choose blessings, because even though we may have some hard times, if we're not going to recommend the solution of death to those outside the womb, whether they're standing in line for a free meal or for a place to live, no, it's the same human being. Let's be consistent. Let's treat the handicapped, the disabled, as well before they're born as we would after they're born, because there's no difference. It's just a change of address. And so it's basically a lie, and you got to look to see where their lie, where it leads to. I want to fulfill every page in my book. I want to fulfill the destiny, and that's what our Creator wants as well, because He spelled it out in writing in stone and in His slogan, to choose life, that we and our descendants will live.
Brianna is asking, do you think having an abortion is still wrong, even if a girl was raped?
The answer is yes. I'll tell you a couple of stories. One is in fact, I have a story about her. She's an attorney. She's beautiful. She's also the product of rape. And she came and she testified before the committee, and she said, my heart beats too. There was a little girl named Bella, and Rebecca Kiesling is her name, by the way. She's the woman who's an attorney who came and testified, who is, through no fault of her own, the product of rape. We brought in a little girl named Bella. She's 3 or 4 years old. She would come to the hearing. She'd bring her baby doll. Cutest little girl you ever saw. And she brought a heart. I didn't instruct her to do this, but she made heart out of construction paper, big red hearts. And she wrote on there, thank you. And she passed it out to the committee members on the day they were considering an exception in the bill for rape and incest. And then they realized they're literally holding her heart in their hands. See, an abortion, what we want to do in society is punish the rapist, not the baby, not the child. And so what we can do for the woman is to help her through that situation. What happens is once a woman is raped, ideally she's treated following the rape. The idea is she's treated for sexually transmitted diseases, for trauma, and to prevent the conception from happening. So what I've found is, and I've written a lot about this in my book, A Heartbeat Away. There's a chapter in here about rape and what happens with, for example, I'll give you an example, suicide hotline. The suicides are not as much from the women who have chosen life. They're from the ones who chose abortion, because the rape was done to this woman. She's a victim of something she had no choice in. But when she participates in abortion, even though she didn't want to be pregnant, what happens is she's making the choice to kill what is biologically, half of her child as well. So instead of giving this child up for adoption, placing it in the arms of parents that will love this child, like my friends did for Rebecca Kiesling or little Bella, what happens is she's participating in a decision to take the life of an innocent child who is killed for the crime of her father, or his or her father. So in America and in Singapore, we don't kill people for the crime of their father. That's not what we do. The Bible tells us not to do that. So what we want to do is help the woman, treat her following the trauma, but make sure we hold her hand and help her through the process, so that no one has to die in this situation. And that's really it. We punish rapists, not babies. I just want to say your life matters, and it's not about our ability. It's about stepping out, and whatever God's put on your heart to do, you're here for a reason. There's a purpose. And I know this, He works through ordinary people who don't have all the most talent, don't have the most money, the biggest connections. I'm just an ordinary person. God gave me an idea, and I just wouldn't quit until we saw it come to pass. And if I can do it, so can each of you. And I believe it can happen in Singapore as well. Let's no longer deny the science. Let's acknowledge that if there's a heartbeat, there's life, that we can at least protect children whose heartbeats can be heard.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the Little You YouTube channel. And make sure to follow us on all our social media accounts linked in the description. Thank you again, and we hope to see you in the next guest speaker series session.